In this video, I want to talk about triggers and how and why they are our best teachers. So, triggers are these moments where we become emotionally charged. Now, they can be positive, lifting us up and motivating us, or they can be really negative, clouding our vision, or at worst, causing us to fall into a depressive state. Now, you can usually tell when you are being triggered, but you might not be aware of it until the moment has passed. And different triggers are going to cause different reactions depending on what your ego thinks will keep you safe in that situation. So your ego relies on past experiences, not logic, which is why we often react the same way over and over and have a hard time breaking out of this conditioning, even when we recognize it's not the best way to handle a situation. And until you become aware of your triggers, you're just going to continue to react to these situations based on your childhood conditioning. And this can look like different things, but it's often referred to as the 4 Fs. So, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So if you're being triggered and you go into fight mode, this is where you might experience rage and aggression and just sort of get really aggressive with your emotional overreaction. If you're someone who goes into flight mode, maybe you start backtracking or you apologize for a situation you're not at fault. You have no reason to apologize, but you do that anyways. And you just kind of want to extract yourself from the situation as soon as possible. If freeze is your modality that you go into, that's when you sort of close yourself off and shut down. You don't necessarily want to get out of the situation, but you stop engaging in the conversation and you just kind of shut off. And then other people, they go into fawning. So you are quick to please or agree to the other person's demand. Again, this is just the way to get out of the situation. But you might think that, oh, they are so great and so smart and they must know better than you, that kind of thing. So those are all different ways to express the trigger. So what's really going on and how can we learn from these uncomfortable moments? For me, understanding how it's all set up really helps. So in the early 1900s, Carl Jung theorized that we're all born whole. And as we develop, the ego or the sense of I, this is a part of our mind that just judges everything as good and bad. And it splits us into our characteristics and traits into two parts. So everything the ego judges as good or positive or beneficial to our survival, that becomes our persona. And this is the mask that we show the world. And everything the ego judges as bad or negative or detrimental to our survival, that gets tucked away into the unconscious or into the shadow. And then so we don't necessarily have access to things that are our inner shadow. Now, what's in your unconscious or your shadow is a part of you, and you need this in order to feel whole. So one way you can become aware of your shadow pieces is by observing your triggers. Now, you are going to project these shadow elements onto other people as a way of witnessing them in a sort of detached way. And you can get triggered because your ego is perceiving these situations as dangerous and it's using it as a way to remind you how scary these traits are. So you better not act like that or do those things because it's so bad and terrible and scary. So what do you do then when you are being triggered? The first thing is just to have that awareness. I'm being triggered. And then the next step is to start taking deep breaths. And you want to breathe deep into your belly. And this is going to help keep you calm and prevent you from going into the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. And then when you are in a safe space, no longer being triggered, that's when you can start to do your shadow work. And so start to ask yourself, what was so triggering about the person or about the event? and really try to get past the judgment of just them being stupid or bad or lazy, whatever that negative shadow piece is. Because this is what is in your shadow, and it's not necessarily who they are. It's what's trying to get your attention. So you need to dig a little bit deeper into that. So for example, if you're triggered by an angry person, then anger is in your shadow and it wants to come out so that you can have access to it. Now, often anger is seen as a negative or bad emotion, but anger really just lets us know when a boundary has been crossed. And like fire, it can protect us and keep us warm and cook our food. It has all these really positive, necessary pieces. But if it gets out of control, then it's going to just burn the whole place to the ground. So, you're not trying to become the angry person. You're just trying to drop the fear of being perceived as the angry person. And so through examination and self-reflection, you can be able, hopefully, to look at times in your life where you maybe suppressed your anger and how that kept you limited. It maybe even caused you to suffer more because you couldn't access your anger when you needed it to protect you. And so through this, shadow work and journaling, you're going to be able to hopefully see this shadow trait as necessary, not necessarily good or bad, just a part of you that you need access to. And then you can start to integrate it into your daily life and allow yourself to feel this feeling or emotion and express it whenever appropriate. So, why do we want to understand our triggers? Well, triggers, they're elements from your shadow that are trying to get your attention. And until you bring this part of yourself out into consciousness, it's going to keep showing up in your life. And then once it's integrated, the shadow piece will no longer need to be projected onto others. So your ego is going to feel less threatened by it. This means that you're going to be less reactive in situations where someone could be perceived as expressing that shadow trait. When you are judging someone based on ego fears, you're really just being reactive and not being able to stay curious. So for example, if anger is in your shadow, and once you start to integrate the anger, you might see less angry people out in the world. Or, maybe that person who you always think is angry, maybe once you start to integrate that, you see that maybe that's just the way they talk. Or maybe they think they're being funny. Or maybe they're being triggered by something you're saying or doing, and they're just going into fight mode. And so being able to pick apart your trigger and integrate it is going to help you with other external situations. Often in conversations, people do get very reactive or offended, and you jump to conclusions. And this is just something the ego does to keep you safe. But it's also really keeping you limited. And so if you can stay curious and ask questions, you might be able to get a little bit more information out of the situation that you missed by judging it so quickly. Because, we quickly judge others to help keep ourselves safe. But often this can cause a lot of problems, and we end up living in a world made up in our mind, and it looks nothing like reality. And that's why multiple people will all have different perspectives of, what actually happened in the conversation or in the situation, because they're all judging it from their own perspective, from their own ego fears. And so bringing awareness to your triggers and integrating your shadow is really going to alter your inner world, but in turn, it will also alter your external world. And to quote Hermes Trismegistus, as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. So I hope this answered some of your questions on triggers. If there's anything else that I didn't cover that you would like more information on, pop a comment below, and hopefully I can either answer you or do another video on it. And if you found this helpful, please like and subscribe so you can see more of my content.